At 73, when I returned from the brink of death, life's biggest surprise was waiting for me. The doctor who restarted my heart was the baby I had been forced to give up half a century ago. It all started on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. I was watering my petunias on the front porch, just like I did every morning. The sun was bright, birds were singing, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. I remember thinking what a beautiful day it was to be alive. Little did I know how close I would come to leaving this world for good. I felt a tightness in my chest at first. Nothing severe, just uncomfortable, like someone was sitting on my ribs. I ignored it and continued with my watering. That's what we old folks tend to do, you know. Ignore the warning signs, pretend everything's fine. But then the pain started to radiate down my left arm, and I felt dizzy. The watering can slipped from my fingers, splashing water all over my house slippers. "Oh my," I remember saying out loud to nobody. My neighbor Sarah must have seen me stumbling, because the next thing I knew, she was at my side, her voice sounding distant, even though she was right next to me. "Martha! Martha, what's wrong?" She was asking, but I couldn't seem to form words. The world started to tilt sideways, and then everything went black. I don't remember the ambulance ride. My next memory is waking up to the sound of beeping machines and the antiseptic smell that only hospitals have. A rhythmic beeping sound filled my ears, and I realized it was my own heartbeat being monitored. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it was made of lead. "Whoa there, take it easy," came a man's voice. I turned my head to see a doctor approaching my bed. He was young, maybe in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You've had quite an ordeal, Mrs. Wilson." "What happened?" I asked, my voice raspy and unfamiliar to my own ears. "You had a heart attack," he said, checking the monitors. "A pretty serious one. Your neighbor called 911 just in time. Another few minutes and—" He trailed off, but I understood what he meant. Another few minutes and I would have died. "I'm Dr. Mitchell, by the way. I'm the cardiologist who'll be overseeing your recovery." He smiled, and something about that smile tickled at the back of my memory. Something familiar, though I couldn't place it. "Thank you for saving me," I said weakly. "That's what we do here," he replied, making a note on his clipboard. "Now, I need to ask you some questions about your medical history." We went through the usual, my medications, previous conditions, family history. When he asked if heart disease ran in my family, I hesitated. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I was adopted as a baby. I don't know my biological family's medical history." Dr. Mitchell looked up from his clipboard, interested. "That can be challenging from a medical perspective. Have you ever tried to find your biological family?" I shook my head. "No. My adoptive parents were wonderful people. I never felt the need to look elsewhere." It wasn't entirely true, but it was the answer I'd been giving for decades. "I understand," he said. "Well, we'll have to be extra vigilant with your care then. You're scheduled for some more tests later today. In the meantime, try to rest." After he left, I lay in that hospital bed thinking about what had just happened. I'd almost died. At 73, I suppose it shouldn't be shocking, but it still rattled me to my core. I'd always thought I'd have more time to travel, to read all those books on my shelf, to finally tell the truth about the past I'd kept buried for 50 years. The past, that baby boy, the child I never got to know. I was just 18 when it happened, a small-town girl who fell for the wrong boy. When I found out I was pregnant, he was already gone, moved to California, with promises to send for me that never materialized. My parents, strict and religious, gave me two options: marry quickly to save face, or give the baby up for adoption. There was no boy to marry, so the choice was made for me. I spent the last months of my pregnancy hidden away at my aunt's house in another town. The day he was born, I got to hold him for just 5 minutes before the nurse took him away. 5 minutes to memorize his face, his tiny fingers, the wisp of dark hair on his head. 5 minutes to say hello and goodbye to the only child I would ever have. They told me it was for the best, that he would go to a loving family who could provide for him in ways I couldn't, that I was too young, too unprepared for motherhood. Maybe they were right, but not a day went by that I didn't think about him, wonder where he was, what he was doing, if he was happy. I never married, never had other children. My life became about teaching other people's children as an elementary school teacher for 40 years. I loved my students, poured my heart into them, perhaps trying to fill the void left by the child I'd given away. As I lay in that hospital bed, memories flooding back, I made a decision. If I survived this, if I got a second chance at life, I would try to find him. I would finally look for the son I'd never forgotten. Little did I know, I wouldn't have to look far at all, because fate has a funny way of bringing people together when they least expect it. And sometimes the person who saves your life is the very one whose life began with yours. The doctor who had just left my room, the man who had restarted my heart when it stopped beating, was about to discover a connection to me that neither of us could have imagined, a connection that began 50 years ago in this very same hospital. The next morning, I woke up feeling slightly better. The crushing pain in my chest had subsided to a dull ache, and the fog in my head had cleared somewhat. Through the window, I could see the sun rising over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. For a moment, I forgot where I was and why I was there. Then reality came rushing back. The heart attack, the ambulance, Dr. Mitchell. A nurse came in to check my vitals. She was a cheerful woman with bright red hair tucked under her cap. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson. How are we feeling today?" she asked, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around my arm. "Better, I think. When can I go home?" She chuckled. "Not so fast. You've had a serious cardiac event. Dr. Mitchell wants to run some more tests before we even think about discharge." "Speaking of Dr. Mitchell," I said, trying to sound casual, "he seems very young to be such an accomplished doctor." "Oh, he's not that young. Early 50s, I think. But he is brilliant, one of the best cardiologists in the state. We're lucky to have him here." She paused, reading my blood pressure. 120/80? Perfect! Whatever he's doing is working. As the nurse continued her checks, I found myself studying Dr. Mitchell's medical notes at the foot of my bed. He had neat, precise handwriting, just like my father. And something else caught my eye. His birth date on the medical chart. June 18th, 1975. The exact day my baby had been born. Could it be possible? The timing matched. The hospital was the same. Was Dr. Mitchell, respected cardiologist, man in his early 50s, the baby I had held for just 5 minutes half a century ago? I tried to dismiss the thought as ridiculous. Coincidences happen. But then I remembered his eyes. Hazel, with a distinctive gold ring around the pupil. My eyes. My father's eyes. The Wilson eyes, as my family called them. Around midday, Dr. Mitchell returned to check on me, accompanied by a young resident doctor. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson. How are we feeling today?" he asked, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around my arm. "Better, I think. This is Dr. Patel, one of our residents. How are you feeling today?" "Better," I said, studying his face more carefully now. There it was, the distinctive eyes, and something else, a small scar on his chin, barely visible beneath his short beard. I had a similar scar from falling off my bike as a child. "Dr. Mitchell," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "where did you grow up?" He looked surprised by the question. "Here in Maplewood, actually. Born and raised. I went away for medical school, but came back to practice. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," I said. I've lived here most of my life, too. Taught elementary school for 40 years at Lincoln Elementary. His eyes lit up. Lincoln Elementary? I went there as a kid. What years did you teach? From 1970 to 2010, I replied. What years were you there? He thought for a moment. Late 70s into the early 80s. But I don't remember a Mrs. Wilson, though. Was that your married name? No, I said, my heart starting to race again. I've never married. I've always been Martha Wilson. He frowned. The name doesn't ring a bell, but it was a long time ago. After they left, I pressed my hands to my face, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The timing fit, the physical similarities were there. He grew up in this town, went to the school where I taught. But I had taught hundreds of children over the years. It could still be a coincidence. That evening, as twilight painted the hospital room in shades of blue and gold, I made a decision. I asked a nurse for a piece of paper and a pen and wrote a note. Dr. Mitchell, I have a rather unusual question to ask you. Would you be willing to stop by my room after your rounds tomorrow? It's not medical. It's personal. Thank you, Martha Wilson. The nurse promised to deliver it, and I spent a restless night wondering if I was making a mistake. What if I was wrong? What if I was right, but he wanted nothing to do with the woman who had given him away? What if this revelation disrupted the life he had built, the person he had become? By morning, I had almost convinced myself to let it go, to accept the extraordinary coincidence for what it was and move on. But when Dr. Mitchell appeared in my doorway, holding my note and looking curiously at me, I knew the time for secrets had passed. Dr. Mitchell, you wanted to see me, Mrs. Wilson? He asked, closing the door behind him. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Please sit down. He took the chair beside my bed, his expression professional but curious. How can I help you? I took a deep breath. Dr. Mitchell, this is going to sound strange, but were you adopted by any chance? His professional demeanor slipped for just a moment, surprise flickering across his face. Yes, I was. How did you know that? Because 50 years ago, in this very hospital, I gave birth to a baby I was forced to give up for adoption, a baby I've thought about every single day since. He stared at me, his face unreadable. Mrs. Wilson, what are you saying? I'm saying that I believe you might be my son, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. The timing fits. You have my eyes, the Wilson eyes, with that gold ring around the pupil. You have a scar on your chin just like mine. I touched my own chin. And you were born here on June 18th, 1975. Dr. Mitchell stood up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. This is a lot to take in. Are you sure about this? No, I admitted. I'm not sure, but there are too many coincidences. He paced the small room, processing this bombshell I had dropped on him. I knew I was adopted. My parents told me when I was 10. They said my birth mother was very young, that she wanted me to have a better life than she could provide. I was 18. I said softly, just a girl myself. Your father left town when he found out I was pregnant. My parents gave me no choice but to give you up. As night fell outside the hospital window, a new chapter of our lives was just beginning to unfold, one neither of us could have predicted, but that perhaps had been written in our very DNA, waiting for the moment when our paths would cross again in the most unexpected way. For 2 days after our conversation, Dr. Mitchell didn't come to my room Another doctor checked on me, explaining that Dr. Mitchell had been called to a medical conference. I knew it was a lie. He was avoiding me, trying to process the bombshell I had dropped on him. I couldn't blame him. I had upended his understanding of who he was, challenged the narrative he had built about his origins. He needed time, and I had to respect that, even as my heart ached with the fear that I might have found my son only to lose him again. On the third day, just as I was finishing my hospital dinner, a bland chicken dish that barely deserved the name, there was a knock at my door. Dr. Mitchell stood there, not in his white coat, but in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater. He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes suggesting he had slept as poorly as I had. "May I come in?" he asked formally. "Of course," I said, straightening up in bed and setting aside my dinner tray. He sat in the chair beside my bed, placing a manila folder on his lap. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The beeping of the heart monitor seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. "I did some research," he said finally. "I still have my original birth certificate, the amended one with my adoptive parents' names, but I also found this." He opened the folder and pulled out a document. It's a non-identifying information form that my parents received when they adopted me. It doesn't name you, but it provides basic details about my birth mother. He handed me the paper, and I read it with trembling hands. Birth mother, 18 years old, 5'4", 120 pounds, hazel eyes, brown hair. High school graduate with plans for college, enjoys reading and music, no known health issues. Reason for adoption, unable to provide for child, no support from birth father. "That's me," I whispered. "That's exactly me at 18. He nodded, his expression still guarded. "There's more." He pulled out a small photo album and turned it so I could see. On the first page was a black and white photo of a newborn baby, tiny and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair. "This is the first picture my parents took of me the day they brought me home." I touched the photo reverently. "You were so beautiful." He turned the page, revealing more baby pictures, then toddler photos, school portraits, sports team photos, tracking his growth from infant to man. My parents made this album for my 30th birthday. They wanted me to see that they had loved me and been proud of me every step of the way. I looked up at him, understanding dawning. "You're worried that embracing me would somehow betray them." He looked startled by my perception, then nodded slowly. "They were wonderful parents. They gave me everything: love, education, support, values. They're both gone now. My father died from cancer 10 years ago, and my mother passed last year, but I still feel loyal to them." "As you should," I said firmly. "Robert, I didn't come looking for you to replace your parents or claim some kind of maternal authority. You're a grown man with your own life, your own family. I just wanted to know you, to see the man you became." Some of the tension seemed to leave his shoulders. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," I said honestly. "But let's start with the basics. Are you married? Do you have children?" A genuine smile crossed his face for the first time. "Yes to both. My wife, Catherine, is a pediatric nurse. We've been married for 25 years. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a lovely woman with a warm smile and kind eyes. "And these are our kids. Emma's 19, studying pre-med at UCLA, and Jack is 16, a junior in high school, baseball fanatic." I studied the photo, marveling at these grandchildren I never knew I had. They're beautiful. You must be so proud. I am, he said, putting away his phone. Now it's your turn. Tell me about your life. So I did. I told him about my 40 years teaching third grade at Lincoln Elementary, about the small house I'd saved up to buy on Maple Street, with its garden full of petunias and tomato plants, about my 2 cats, Biscuit and Gravy, who were probably terrorizing my neighbor Sarah, who was feeding them while I was in the hospital. I never married, I told him. There were a few relationships over the years, but nothing that stuck. I think in some ways I was afraid to love anyone too much after losing you. He looked down at his hands. That must have been lonely. Sometimes, I admitted, but I had my students, my friends, my books. It wasn't the life I might have chosen at 18, but it was a good life. Did you ever regret it? Giving me up? The question hit me like a physical blow, though I'd been expecting it. Regret isn't the right word, I said carefully. I mourned you every day. I missed you with every breath. But regret implies I had a choice, and I didn't, really. I was a child myself, with no money, no support, no way to provide for you. My parents made it clear that if I kept you, I would be on my own, on the street. That seems harsh, he said, frowning. It was a different time. Unwed mothers were shamed, hidden away. My pregnancy was treated like a family disgrace rather than the miracle it was. The day they took you from my arms was the worst day of my life. But I believed you would have a better life with parents who could give you everything I couldn't. And I did, he acknowledged. I can't imagine growing up any other way. Then it was worth it, I said simply. Every tear, every lonely night, every birthday spent wondering where you were and if you were happy. It was all worth it if you had a good life. He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. You know, I used to imagine meeting my birth mother. As a kid, I created all these fantasies about who she might be, a movie star, a spy, someone exciting and glamorous who had a really good reason for giving me up. I laughed softly. Sorry to disappoint you. Just a small-town school teacher with a garden and 2 cats. No, he said seriously. Not just that. A woman who made an impossible choice out of love, who built a life for herself despite heartbreak, who never forgot the child she gave away. He paused, then added quietly, I'm not disappointed. Those words, so simple yet so profound, broke something open inside me. Tears filled my eyes, and this time I didn't try to hold them back. I have something to show you, I said when I could speak again. When I'm discharged, if you'd like to visit my house, I'll show you the baby bracelet, the Polaroid. I kept a journal, too, writing letters to you that I never thought you'd read. It might help you understand what those days were like. He nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. I'd like that. As he stood to leave, I asked the question that had been burning in my heart. Will I see you again? Not just as my doctor, but as my son? He hesitated for just a moment before answering, Yes, we have 50 years to catch up on after all. And as he left my hospital room, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The weight of a secret carried for half a century, finally shared with the one person who had the right to know. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Robert, it still felt strange to think of Dr. Mitchell by his first name, insisted on driving me home himself. It's not necessary, I protested. My neighbor Sarah offered to pick me up. I want to, he said simply. Besides, you promised to show me that baby bracelet and Polaroid. So I found myself in the passenger seat of his sleek sedan, watching the familiar streets of Maplewood pass by as we drove to my small house on Maple Street. The spring day was beautiful. Cherry trees in full bloom, their pink petals drifting down like snow. It's strange, Robert said as we drove. I must have passed your house hundreds of times over the years, maybe even seen you in town. We could have been standing next to each other in line at the grocery store and never known. The universe works in mysterious ways, I replied. Maybe we weren't ready to find each other until now. When we arrived at my house, my cats greeted us with indignant meows, clearly upset at my extended absence. Robert crouched down to scratch behind their ears, earning immediate approval. They like you, I observed. I've always been good with animals, he said. My parents said I was forever bringing home strays as a kid. The mention of his adoptive parents reminded me of the delicate balance we were trying to strike, acknowledging our biological connection without diminishing the family that had raised him. I led him to the living room where I kept the wooden jewelry box that contained my most precious possessions. I've kept this with me through 3 moves, I told him, sitting beside me on the sofa. It's traveled everywhere I have. I opened the box carefully. On top was a small plastic hospital bracelet, yellowed with age. Baby Boy Wilson, it read, with the date June 18th, 1975, printed below. May I? Robert asked, his voice hushed. I handed him the tiny bracelet. He held it in his palm, staring at it as if it were a precious artifact from a museum, which, in a way, it was, a relic from the first day of his life. It's so small, he murmured. You were small, 6 pounds, 4 ounces, but perfect in every way. Next, I showed him the Polaroid, faded and slightly blurry, but clearly showing a tiny newborn with a shock of dark hair and unfocused eyes, swaddled in a hospital blanket. The nurse took this quickly when no one was looking. She slipped it to me before they took you away. Said every mother should have at least one picture of her baby. Robert studied the photo, his expression a mixture of wonder and sadness. I've never seen a picture of myself this young. My parents' album starts on the day they brought me home, about a week later. There's one more thing, I said, reaching into the box. I pulled out a small leather-bound journal, its pages wavy with age and tears. I started writing to you the day after you were born. Just letters about my life, things I wished I could tell you. I kept it up for years, though less frequently as time went on. I handed him the journal, but he gently pushed it back to me. Would you read some of it? I'd like to hear it in your voice. I opened the journal to the first entry, dated June 19th, 1975. My dearest baby boy, I read, my voice trembling slightly. They took you away yesterday, and I feel like they took my heart with you. The nurse let me hold you for 5 minutes, 5 precious minutes that I will treasure for the rest of my life. You had the tiniest fingers I've ever seen and a little swirl of dark hair on the top of your head. Your eyes were blue, like all newborns, but I wonder if they'll turn hazel like mine as you grow. I glanced up to see tears in Robert's eyes, mirroring my own. They did, he said softly. Turn hazel, I mean. I nodded and continued reading. I want you to know that giving you up wasn't my choice. If the world were different, if I were older, stronger, more independent, I would have kept you and loved you every day of your life. But I'm just a girl myself with no way to provide for you. They tell me you're going to a good family, people who have been waiting for a baby to love. I hope they cherish you as I would have. I hope they tell you every day how special you are. They did, Robert whispered. They really did. I closed the journal, unable to read more through my tears. Robert handed me a tissue from a box on the coffee table. After a moment, he said, I'd like to tell you something.
when I was in the operating room trying to restart your heart, there was a moment when I thought we might lose you, and I felt this connection, this strange, almost mystical feeling that I couldn't let you go, that it was vitally important that you survive. At the time, I attributed it to professional dedication. I hate losing patients. But now I wonder if some part of me recognized you, if blood called to blood somehow. I'd like to think so, I said. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, each processing the emotional weight of the moment. Finally, Robert cleared his throat. He told Catherine about you, about our discovery. She wants to meet you, and the kids too, especially Emma. She's studying genetics at UCLA, so the whole biological family connection fascinates her. I'd like that very much, I said, trying to contain my joy at the thought of meeting the family I never knew I had. There's something else, he added, looking slightly uncomfortable. Catherine suggested that we might consider a DNA test, just to make it official. Not that I have any doubts, he hastened to add, but for medical records, family history. Of course, I agreed. It would be good to have confirmation. As he prepared to leave, promising to call the next day to arrange a family dinner, I walked him to the door. On the porch, he hesitated, then pulled me into a gentle hug. Thank you, he said simply, for the journal, for keeping these things, for never forgetting me. How could I forget you? You were the most important thing that ever happened to me. As I watched him drive away, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. 50 years of wondering, of silent grief, of questions without answers, all resolved in the span of a few extraordinary days. A heart attack had nearly taken my life, but in the process, it had given me back the most precious thing I ever lost. And as I returned to my quiet house, now filled with the echoes of this momentous reunion, I knew that my life was only just beginning. At 73, with the new family to love, I had been given a second chance, and I intended to make the most of every single moment.
Over the next few weeks, my relationship with Robert and his family blossomed in ways I could never have imagined. The DNA test confirmed what we already knew in our hearts. We were indeed mother and son, connected by blood and now by choice as well. Catherine, Robert's wife, was the first to embrace me wholeheartedly. She arrived at my door one afternoon with a homemade casserole and a warm smile. "Robert's at the hospital, but I couldn't wait to meet you properly," she explained. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit." "Not at all," I said, genuinely touched by her initiative. Over tea in my small kitchen, Catherine shared stories of her life with Robert, their meeting in medical school, their early years of marriage, the challenges and joys of raising Emma and Jack. She showed me pictures on her phone of family vacations, school events, ordinary moments made extraordinary by the fact that I was seeing them for the first time. "He's a wonderful father," she told me. "Patient, involved, supportive. I always credited his adoptive parents for that. They set such a good example. But now, meeting you, I see he got some of those qualities from you too." "From me?" I asked, surprised. "The way you talk about your former students, the care you took with them, that's the same way Robert is with our children. That capacity for nurturing didn't come from nowhere." Her words touched me deeply. I had never considered that, despite our separation, some essential part of me might have lived on in Robert, shaping the man and father he became. The following weekend brought my first meeting with my grandchildren. Emma flew home from college specifically to meet me, while Jack approached the situation with typical teenage reserve that quickly melted into genuine interest when he discovered I was an avid baker. "You made these cookies from scratch?" he asked, reaching for his third chocolate chip cookie. "They're way better than store-bought."
I could teach you the recipe if you like, I offered, and a new tradition was born. Every Saturday after that, Jack would come to my house for baking lessons, cinnamon rolls, fruit tarts, and eventually my special dinner rolls that became his signature contribution to family meals. Emma, with her scientific mind and warm heart, was fascinated by our story from both a genetic and emotional perspective. She interviewed me extensively about our family medical history for a class project, but our conversations always extended beyond the academic into more personal territory. Did you ever try to find Dad before the heart attack, I mean? I thought about it many times, I admitted. But in those days, adoptions were closed, records were sealed, and there was a strong belief that birth mothers should stay away, that trying to find the children we had given up was selfish, disruptive. So I respected those boundaries, even though it broke my heart. "I'm glad you found each other now," she said, gently patting soil around a delicate seedling. "Or rather, that he found you. It's like the universe was saving this relationship for when you both needed it most." Robert and I developed our own rituals. Sunday morning coffee on my porch, where we would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Sometimes we discussed weighty topics, his childhood questions about his origins, my decades of silent grief. Other times we simply enjoyed each other's company, discovering shared traits like our mutual love of mystery novels and tendency to solve the crimes before the detective did it. "It's in the blood," Robert joked when we both correctly identified the culprit in a TV mystery we were watching. Those moments of recognition, the discovery of shared traits that could only be genetic, became precious to both of us. My analytical mind mirrored in his approach to complex medical cases, his artistic talent, dormant but present, reflecting my own youthful interest in painting. The distinctive Wilson laugh, starting low and building to a hearty crescendo that had skipped me but emerged in Emma. About 6 months after our reunion, Robert broached a subject that would change my life once again. "Mom," he started calling me that recently, tentatively at first, but with increasing comfort. "Catherine and I have been talking. Your house is getting to be a lot for you to manage alone, and you're a 20-minute drive from us, which isn't ideal for frequent visits." I felt a flutter of anxiety. Was he suggesting a retirement home? I wasn't ready for that level of dependence. "There's a small house for sale just 3 doors down from us. It's all on one level, with a manageable yard, but still enough space for a garden. It would be perfect for you, and you'd be right in the neighborhood." The offer touched me deeply. Moving would be a challenge at my age, sorting through decades of accumulated possessions. But the prospect of being just 3 doors down from Robert and his family, and of truly integrating into their daily lives rather than being an occasional visitor, was too wonderful to pass up. "I'd like to see this house," I said. By the end of summer, I was settled into my new home, a charming one-story cottage with a bay window overlooking a small but sunny yard. My life, which had once been defined by solitude and quiet routine, now overflowed with family connections. Sunday dinners at Robert and Catherine's house, baking sessions with Jack, video calls with Emma when she returned to college, impromptu visits from Robert, stopping by on his way home from the hospital to share a cup of tea in the events of his day. One evening, as we sat on my new porch watching the sunset, Robert said, "You know, I've been thinking, our story, it's pretty extraordinary. The medical coincidence alone is fascinating. I wonder if we should share it more widely." "What do you mean?" I asked. "A colleague of mine is organizing a medical conference in Chicago, a panel discussion on heart health and women. He asked me to participate, and I had an idea. What if we present it together, mother and son, the patient and the doctor? It might help others in similar situations. The idea both terrified and excited me. For 50 years, I have kept my pregnancy and the child I had given up a closely guarded secret. The thought of sharing our story publicly was daunting. But if it could help others, other birth mothers still searching, other adoptees wondering about their origins, wasn't that worth stepping outside my comfort zone? I'll do it, I decided. If you think it would help others, I'm willing to try. Robert's face lit up. Really? That's wonderful. I'll tell Dr. Matthews tomorrow. As he left that evening, I marveled at how completely my life had transformed in the span of a few short months, from a lonely old woman facing death in a hospital room to a mother and grandmother surrounded by love, from a keeper of painful secrets to a woman ready to share her story with the world. The journey had been extraordinary, and it had all begun with a failing heart that paradoxically had led me to the greatest healing of my life.
The medical conference in Chicago loomed on the horizon, both exciting and terrifying. Robert and I spent weeks preparing our presentation, deciding what aspects of our story to share and how to connect it to the medical issues at hand. Catherine helped me shop for a suitable outfit. Something professional but comfortable, she advised. Emma coached me on public speaking techniques she had learned in her college communications class. Even Jack contributed, offering to create digital slides for our presentation. Keep it simple but impactful, he advised with surprising maturity. People remember stories better than statistics. The night before we were to leave for Chicago, I lay awake in bed, nervous about what lay ahead. Not just the speaking engagement, though that certainly triggered my anxiety, but the deeper significance of what we were doing. For 50 years, I had kept my pregnancy and the child I had given up a closely guarded secret. Now, I was preparing to tell our story to a room full of strangers. Was I ready for that level of exposure? For the questions that might follow, some of which could be painful to answer? By morning, my nerves had settled into a quiet determination. This journey, from heartbroken teenage mother to cardiac patient to reconnected family, had meaning beyond my personal experience. If sharing it could help others, then the vulnerability was worth it. The conference hotel was grander than anywhere I'd stayed before, with marble floors and crystal chandeliers in the lobby. Our presentations were scheduled for the following morning, giving us the evening to rest and prepare. We attended the conference welcome dinner, where Robert introduced me to colleagues from across the country. "This is my mother, Martha Wilson," he would say, his voice clear and unapologetic. "We'll be presenting together tomorrow on the cardiac patient experience." Some responded with polite interest, but others, sensing there was more to the story, asked questions that led to abbreviated versions of our reconnection. One cardiologist from Boston was particularly moved. "What an extraordinary story," she said, clasping my hand. "I've worked with adoptees searching for biological parents, but never one who found their birth mother through a medical emergency. It's almost poetic. The son literally healing the mother's heart." The next morning, as we were ushered to the small stage at the front of the room, Robert gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, then stepped back to let me begin as we had planned. I looked out at the sea of expectant faces and took a deep breath. "Good morning," I started, my voice steadier than I felt. "My name is Martha Wilson. I'm 73 years old, a retired elementary school teacher, and 7 months ago, I had a heart attack while watering petunias on my front porch." The room quieted as I described that morning. The subtle symptoms I had initially dismissed, the sudden collapse, waking in the hospital to find Dr. Mitchell standing over me. I explained how women's heart attack symptoms often differ from men's, how my own ignorance about these differences had nearly cost me my life.
Then I paused, looking over at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. What I didn't know then was that the doctor who saved my life, who literally restarted my heart when it stopped beating, was my biological son, whom I had given up for adoption 50 years earlier. A ripple of astonishment moved through the audience. I saw wide eyes, exchange glances, a few gasps, but I pressed on, explaining the circumstances of my pregnancy at 18, the painful decision that had been made for me, and the half-century of separation that followed. When it was Robert's turn to speak, he moved to stand beside me rather than taking my place at the microphone. From a medical perspective, this case presents fascinating coincidences. The heart abnormality that helped confirm our biological connection, the statistical improbability of a son treating his birth mother without either being aware of the relationship. But beyond the medical curiosities, this experience has taught me profound lessons about healing, both physical and emotional. Together, we shared how our reconnection had unfolded, the initial shock giving way to cautious exploration and eventually to genuine family bonds. We discussed how knowledge of our biological connection had enhanced the medical care, with Robert better able to anticipate my responses to certain treatments based on genetic factors. But most importantly, Robert concluded, this experience reminded all of us in the medical profession that our patients are not just collections of symptoms and conditions. They are human beings with complex histories, with lives that extend far beyond the hospital walls. My mother's heart attack brought us together after 50 years of separation, giving us both a second chance at a relationship we thought was lost forever. And in that way, while the heart attack nearly ended my life, it also gave me back the most precious part of it. A medical crisis became the gateway to healing that transcended the physical. When we finished, the room erupted in applause. During the question and answer session that followed, we were touched by the thoughtful, respectful queries, not just about the medical aspects, but about the emotional journey we had taken. After the session ended, many attendees approached us individually, sharing their own stories of adoption, reconnection, or medical coincidences. One older physician confided that he too had given up a child for adoption in his youth and had never had the courage to search. But after hearing your story, he told me, his eyes moist, I think perhaps I will. By the time we left the conference center, both Robert and I were emotionally drained but deeply satisfied. We had shared our truth, and it had resonated in ways we couldn't have anticipated. I think we made a difference today, Robert said as we walked through the hotel lobby, for more people than we know.
The year that followed our Chicago presentation was filled with unexpected developments. The medical journal article that Robert wrote about our case, Heart to Heart, when patient and physician discover a biological connection, was published in a prestigious cardiology journal, bringing more attention to our story. A documentary filmmaker read the article and approached us about participating in a series on extraordinary family reunions. It would be tastefully done, Robert assured me when I expressed hesitation, not sensationalized. They want to explore the themes of adoption, reconnection, and the role that medicine played in bringing us together. After careful consideration, I agreed. If our experience could offer hope to others separated by adoption, the vulnerability was worth it. The documentary aired in February, almost exactly a year after my heart attack. We gathered at Robert and Catherine's house to watch it together, a family viewing party, complete with Jack's homemade cookies and Emma home from college for the occasion. Sister Mary Catherine, my oldest friend who had been my confidant during my pregnancy all those years ago, joined us as well, having flown in specifically for the occasion. Seeing our story through the filmmaker's lens was a surreal experience. They had interwoven our interviews with expert commentary from adoption counselors and medical ethicists, creating a narrative that was both personally intimate and universally relatable. The final scene showed Robert and me walking through the hospital corridor, his hand supportively at my elbow, both of us laughing at something unheard. The bond between mother and child, the narrator concluded, proves resilient beyond time, beyond separation, beyond all logical expectation. In Martha and Robert's extraordinary reunion, we see the persistence of connection, the healing power of truth, and the reminder that it is never too late for love to find its way home. As the credits rolled, we sat in contemplative silence for a moment. Then Emma spoke up. "You know what's amazing?" she said. "If Grandma Martha hadn't had that heart attack, if Dad hadn't been the doctor on call that day, if they hadn't noticed the similarities, none of this would have happened. We wouldn't be sitting here together. It's like the universe conspired to bring you back together," Catherine added. "Or perhaps," Sister Mary Catherine suggested, "it was always meant to be this way. The separation was necessary for a time, but the reunion was inevitable." "Whatever brought us together," Robert said, raising his glass, "I'm grateful. To second chances, to healing, to family found against all odds." The documentary led to more opportunities to share our story. Interviews from medical publications, invitations to speak at adoption conferences, even a feature in a national magazine focused on senior health and wellness. Each time we told our story, we received messages from others searching for lost family members, or from those who had found each other and recognized elements of their own journey in ours. But the most meaningful impacts were the private ones, the small ways in which our reunited family grew closer with each passing day. My relationship with Robert deepened from the tentative reconnection of those early days to something comfortable and secure. Not the traditional mother-son relationship, that ship had sailed long ago, but a deep friendship grounded in our biological connection and enriched by genuine affection and respect. With Catherine, I found a daughter-in-law who became a dear friend, someone who included me in family decisions and traditions without hesitation. Emma and Jack embraced me as their grandmother with an openness that still amazed me, seeking my advice, sharing their triumphs and challenges, weaving me into the fabric of their lives as if I had always been there. My 74th birthday, which fell a little over a year after our reunion, was celebrated with a family party at Robert and Catherine's house. As I blew out the candles on the cake that Jack had proudly baked using my recipe, I made a silent wish, not for anything new or different, but for the continuation of this precious gift I had already received, the chance to know and love the family I had thought lost to me forever. After the party, as Robert walked me the short distance back to my house, he asked, "Are you happy, Mom, with how everything has turned out?" I considered the question, looking up at the star-filled sky. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Grateful, amazed. Sometimes I still can't believe this isn't all a dream, that my heart had to stop beating for me to find my way back to you. "Not just to me," he corrected gently, "to all of us. You've become such an important part of our family. I can't imagine life without you in it now." 50 years is a long time to make up for, I said. "We're doing pretty well, I think," he replied with a smile. "And we have plenty of time ahead." At my door, he hugged me goodnight, and as I watched him walk back through the gently falling snow to his own home, just 3 doors away, I felt a profound sense of completion. The circle that had broken 50 years ago had not only closed, but expanded to include Catherine, Emma, Jack, a family I could never have imagined when I was 18 and heartbroken, watching my baby being carried away. Inside my cozy house, I made a cup of tea and sat by the window watching the snow transform the world outside. On my mantel stood the family photos, old and new side by side, my history and my present in visual harmony. Beside them, in a place of honor, was the baby bracelet, now preserved in a small glass case that Emma had given me for Christmas. My life had come full circle in the most unexpected way. The heart that had stopped beating in that hospital room had been given a second chance, not just to life, but to love, and I intended to make the most of every single beat. Spring arrived with a burst of color and new beginnings. My garden, which Jack had helped me plant in my new yard, bloomed with tulips and daffodils. Emma had been accepted to a prestigious medical research program for the summer, following in her father's footsteps. Catherine had been promoted to head nurse in the pediatric department, and Robert had been nominated for a prestigious medical award for our heart health awareness campaign that had grown out of our conference presentation. Life had settled into a rhythm I never could have imagined a year and a half earlier. Sunday dinners with the family, weekly baking sessions with Jack, FaceTime calls with Emma, coffee on the porch with Robert, shopping expeditions with Catherine. My days, once marked by solitary routine, now overflowed with connection and purpose. One warm May afternoon, as I was tending to my garden, I spotted a young woman walking slowly down the street, looking at house numbers. She was in her early 20s, with long, dark hair and a hesitant manner. When she reached my yard, she stopped, her eyes finding me among the flower beds. "Excuse me," she called. "Are you Martha Wilson?" "I am," I replied, brushing soil from my gardening gloves as I stood. "My name is Olivia," she said, taking a few steps closer. "Olivia Chen. I saw the documentary about you and your son. I've been trying to find the courage to contact you for months." Something in her tone and the way she nervously twisted her hands told me this wasn't just a fan of our story. "Would you like to come in for some tea?" I offered. Once settled in my living room, each with a cup of tea, Olivia explained her visit. "I was adopted as a baby," she began. "I always knew. My parents were very open about it. They're wonderful people, and I had a happy childhood. But I've always wondered about my birth mother. After I turned 18, I requested my adoption records, but they didn't contain much information." She paused, taking a sip of tea to steady herself. "Watching your documentary, seeing how you never forgot your son, how you kept his baby bracelet all those years, it made me wonder if my birth mother might have felt the same way, if she might be out there somewhere thinking about me." "I'm sure she is," I said gently. "Every birth mother I've ever spoken to thinks about their child, wonders what became of them. That's why I wanted to talk to you for advice. I'm considering trying to find her, but I'm scared. What if she doesn't want to be found? What if she's built a new life and I'm just a painful reminder of the past? Or what if I find her and I'm disappointed somehow?" I considered her questions carefully, recognizing the fears that had haunted me during those first days after reconnecting with Robert. "Those are all valid concerns," I said. "I can't promise that a reunion would be as fortunate as mine was with Robert. Every situation is unique, but I can tell you this: the truth, however complicated, is usually better than uncertainty. And even if a reunion isn't possible or doesn't go as hoped, knowing you tried can bring its own kind of peace." We talked for over an hour, Olivia asking thoughtful questions about my experience, sharing details of her own adoption story. By the time she left, with promises to keep me updated on her search, I felt a deep connection to this young woman whose journey mirrored Robert's in so many ways. That evening, when I told Robert about Olivia's visit, he was thoughtful. "It's amazing how our story keeps rippling outwards, touching lives we never even imagined." I agreed. It makes all the publicity worth it. If sharing our experience helps even one person find their way to healing, to answers, to connection, that's a gift beyond measure. As the summer unfolded, more visitors came, other adoptees seeking advice, birth mothers who had never searched for the children they had given up.
medical professionals interested in the psychological aspects of our reunion. Robert and I found ourselves becoming reluctant experts on adoption reunion, always careful to emphasize that our story was just one among many, that each family's journey was unique. Olivia kept her promise to stay in touch, sending emails about her search progress. With the help of a specialized agency in DNA testing, she had identified a potential birth mother living in Oregon. The woman had agreed to exchange letters, a cautious first step towards possibly meeting in person. "I'm nervous but excited," Olivia wrote. "Whatever happens, I'm grateful to have taken this step. Thank you for giving me the courage to try." Her words touched me deeply, reminding me of how far I had come from that frightened 18-year-old girl who had no choice but to give away her baby. Now, in my 70s, I had found a new purpose, using my experience to help others navigate the complex emotions and practical challenges of adoption reunion. In late July, Robert and Catherine hosted a family barbecue in their backyard. Emma was home from her summer program, Jack had just returned from baseball camp, and the mood was festive. As I watched my son at the grill, laughing with Jack about some private joke, Catherine arranging food on the patio table, Emma showing me photos from her research lab, I was struck by the extraordinary gift I had been given. Not just the gift of finding Robert after 50 years, but the gift of this extended family that had welcomed me without reservation. The gift of belonging, of continuity, of seeing my own features reflected in Emma's smile and Jack's thoughtful gaze. The gift of knowing that my bloodline continued, that some essential part of me would live on through them. "Penny for your thoughts, Grandma," Emma said, noticing my momentary distraction. "Just counting my blessings and thinking how strange and wonderful life can be. How the worst day of my life, giving you up, led eventually to the best days of my life, finding you again and becoming a part of this family." Robert called us to the table then, and as we gathered for the meal, he raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said simply, "found, chosen, and cherished." We clinked glasses, the simple toast encompassing the complex journey that had brought us to this moment of shared joy. And as the summer evenings stretched golden around us, I realized that my heart, the physical one that had failed and been restarted, and the metaphorical one that had carried the wound of separation for 50 years, was finally, completely healed.
Autumn arrived with crisp days and cool nights, painting the trees in shades of gold and crimson. I had settled into my new life with a contentment I had never thought possible. My days had a pleasant rhythm: mornings in the garden while the weather held, afternoons volunteering at the local library or working on the book I had started writing about our experience, evenings often spent with Robert and his family. The book had been Catherine's idea. "Your story deserves to be told in your own words," she had insisted. "Not just the medical miracle, but all of it. The young girl, the teacher, the woman who never gave up hope." Initially reluctant, I had found the writing process unexpectedly therapeutic. Revisiting those painful early years, the shame of being an unwed mother in the 1970s, the gut-wrenching moment when they took my baby away, the decades of silent grieving, was difficult but cathartic. And being able to end the narrative with our miraculous reunion and the joy that followed gave the story an arc of redemption that felt right and true. Robert read each chapter as I completed it, sometimes with tears in his eyes. "It's strange," he told me one evening as we sat on my porch discussing the latest section. "Reading about your pregnancy, the birth, it's like reading about myself, but from a perspective I never considered. All these years, I had this sanitized version of my adoption, that you were too young, that you wanted a better life for me. But the reality was so much more complex, so much more heartbreaking."
Does it change how you feel? I asked, worried that the raw honesty of my account might disrupt the delicate balance we had achieved. He considered the question carefully. It deepens my understanding of you, of the circumstances, of myself. And it makes me even more grateful that we found each other again, that we have this chance to rewrite the ending. In late October, just as the last leaves were falling, I received a phone call from Olivia Chen, the young adoptee who had sought my advice months earlier. "I met her," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and emotion. "My birth mother. We had lunch yesterday in Portland." "Oh, Olivia," I breathed. "How did it go?" "It was intense, beautiful and awkward and overwhelming all at once. She cried when she saw me, said I looked just like her mother, my grandmother, and she told me she's thought about me every single day since I was born, just like you said." "I'm so happy for you both," I said, genuinely moved by her news. "I wanted you to know," Olivia continued, "that your story gave me the courage to take this step, to reach out, to try. Whatever happens next, whether we develop a relationship or not, I'll always be grateful that I got to meet her, to ask the questions I've carried all my life." After we hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about the ripple effects of our story, how one extraordinary coincidence had led not only to my reunion with Robert, but had inspired others to seek their own healing, their own answers. It was a reminder that even our most personal experiences can have wider impacts, touching lives we never meet, in ways we might never know. As the holidays approached, our family made plans for Thanksgiving, our second one together since our reunion. Last year's celebration had been emotional, filled with the newness of our connection. This year felt different, more settled, the wonder of our reunion giving way to the comfortable certainty of established family bonds. Emma brought her new boyfriend home from college, a serious young man studying environmental science who looked appropriately nervous to be meeting the family. Jack, now 17 and applying to colleges himself, proudly presented the dinner rolls he had baked using my recipe, now perfected after months of Saturday lessons. As we gathered around Robert and Catherine's dining room table, I looked at the faces of my newfound family, Robert carving the turkey with careful precision, Catherine arranging serving dishes, Emma and her new boyfriend deep in conversation, Jack sneaking a roll before the meal officially began, and I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to my eyes.
"Are you okay, Mom?" Robert asked, noticing my emotion. "More than okay," I assured him, just overwhelmed by how blessed I am. For so many years, holidays were the hardest times, when the absence of family felt most acute. And now, here I am, surrounded by all of you. "Well, get used to it," Catherine said warmly. "You're stuck with us now." After dinner, as we relaxed in the living room with coffee and pie, Emma made an announcement that brought a fresh wave of joy. "I've decided on my medical specialty," she said. "I'm going into cardiology, like Dad." Robert looked both surprised and deeply moved. "Are you sure? It's a demanding field." Emma nodded firmly. "I'm sure. I've been thinking about it for a while, but what really decided me was our story, how a heart condition brought you and Grandma Martha together after 50 years. I want to be part of medicine that doesn't just heal bodies, but can heal lives in unexpected ways." Robert's eyes met mine across the room, a look of wonder and pride passing between us. The legacy of our reunion would continue through Emma, touching patients and families we would never meet, extending the healing that had begun in that hospital room when my heart stopped and his hands brought it back to life. Later that night, as Robert walked me home through the crisp autumn air, he asked a question that caught me by surprise. "Do you ever wonder what might have been if you had been able to keep me, if we had been mother and son from the beginning?" I considered his question carefully. "Of course I do," I admitted. Especially when I first found you, I imagined all the birthdays, graduations, ordinary moments I missed. But then I realized if I had kept you, everything would have been different. You wouldn't have had the parents who raised you, the education they provided, the values they instilled. You might not have become a doctor, might not have met Catherine, might not have had Emma and Jack. Our lives would have taken entirely different paths. So you don't regret it anymore? He asked. I regret that I didn't have a choice, I clarified. I regret the circumstances that forced us apart, but I can't regret the outcome, the man you became, the family you created, even the miraculous way we found each other again. It's not the story I would have chosen at 18, but it's a story with its own kind of beauty, its own redemption. He nodded, understanding. I feel the same way. I wish things could have been different for you, that you hadn't had to carry that grief alone for so many years, but I'm grateful for the parents who raised me, for the life I've had. And I'm incredibly grateful that we found each other again, that we have this second chance. At my door, he hugged me goodnight, and as I watched him walk back to his own house, I felt the familiar sense of wonder that had become part of my daily life. Wonder at the unexpected turns of fate, at the resilience of human connection, at the healing that can come even after decades of separation. Inside, I made a cup of tea and settled at my desk where my manuscript lay open to the final chapter. I had been struggling with how to end the book, how to capture the meaning of our extraordinary journey in a way that might resonate with others. But now the words came easily, flowing from a heart that had known both the deepest sorrow and the most profound joy. They say lightning never strikes the same place twice, but miracles, it seems, can happen in the same hospital room 50 years apart. In 1975, in a small delivery room at Maplewood General, I gave life to a son I thought I would never know. In 2023, in a cardiac care unit in that same hospital, that son, now a skilled cardiologist, gave life back to me when my heart failed. At 74, I have learned that it is never too late for healing, never too late for joy, never too late for a new chapter to begin. The young girl who wept as her baby was taken away could never have imagined the woman I am today, surrounded by family, embraced by love, finally whole after a lifetime of carrying an invisible wound. To those who may read these words and recognize their own story of separation, of loss, of wondering, take heart. The connections that matter most have a way of persisting, of finding their path back to wholeness even across decades of silence. The heart knows, the heart remembers, and sometimes, against all odds, the heart finds its way home.
Winter arrived with a blanket of snow and the bustle of holiday preparations. My little house, once so quiet and solitary, now hummed with activity. Emma had come home from college for winter break and spent hours helping me decorate a Christmas tree, the first I had put up in many years. Jack continued his baking apprenticeship, filling my kitchen with the scents of gingerbread and peppermint. Catherine stopped by almost daily, sometimes just for coffee, other times to help with errands or to collaborate on holiday plans. And Robert, my son, my miracle, my heart's restoration, called every morning and evening, a ritual that had begun during my recovery from the heart attack and continued as a cherished connection between us. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" he would ask, his voice carrying the perfect blend of doctor's concern and son's affection. "Never better," was my usual reply. And it was true. Despite the physical frailties of age, I had never felt more alive, more purposeful, more complete. My manuscript had been completed and, to my surprise, accepted by a small publishing house specializing in memoirs. The Doctor Who Saved My Heart, A Mother and Son Reunited After 50 Years, would be released in the spring with a foreword written by Robert from his perspective as both physician and son. "It's a story that needs to be told," the editor had said during our first conversation, "not just for those personally touched by adoption, but for anyone who has ever wondered if reconciliation is possible after profound loss." Christmas Eve found us gathered at Robert and Catherine's house for a traditional celebration. The tree twinkled with lights, presents spilled across the floor, and the dining table was set with Catherine's grandmother's china. Emma's boyfriend had joined us again, looking more comfortable now than at Thanksgiving. Jack had invited a girl from school, just a friend, Grandma, he insisted when I raised an eyebrow, who turned out to be a delightful young woman with a quick wit and kind smile. After dinner, we exchanged gifts. I had shopped carefully for each member of my newfound family. Books for Robert and Emma, reflecting their shared intellectual curiosity, a hand-knitted scarf for Catherine in her favorite shade of blue, a professional quality stand mixer for Jack, who had outgrown my old handheld model in his baking adventures. But it was their gift to me that left me speechless. Robert handed me a small, beautifully wrapped box. Inside was a heart-shaped locket on a delicate silver chain. When I opened it, I found a tiny reproduction of the Polaroid of newborn Robert on one side and a recent family photo on the other, past and present, loss and reunion contained in one perfect circle. "So you can always keep us close to your heart," Robert explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Even the part you thought was lost forever." Catherine helped me fasten it around my neck, and I touched it reverently, feeling the weight of it against my skin, a tangible symbol of the journey we had taken, the broken circle, now complete. Later, as the younger generation moved to the living room for games, Robert, Catherine, and I lingered at the table, reminiscing about the extraordinary year and a half since my heart attack had brought us together. "I never imagined my life could change so completely at 73, I mused. "I thought I knew exactly what my remaining years would look like. Quiet, solitary, peaceful in their own way. And then one medical emergency rewrote everything." "For all of us," Catherine added. "You haven't just changed your own life, Martha. You've enriched all of ours." Emma and Jack having a grandmother, Robert discovering his origins, me gaining a mother-in-law who's also become a dear friend. "And beyond our family," Robert pointed out. "Think of Olivia, finding her birth mother because of our story. Think of the patients who've benefited from our cardiac awareness campaign. The ripple effects keep expanding." As midnight approached, we joined the others in the living room for what Robert explained was a family tradition, reading A Christmas Carol aloud, with different family members taking different parts. I was assigned the role of the ghost of Christmas past, which seemed fitting, since so much of our story was about reconciling with history, finding healing in confronting long-buried truths. When the reading concluded, Jack suggested we go caroling in the neighborhood, another family tradition. Bundled in coats and scarves against the winter night, we made our way down the snowy street, singing Silent Night and Joy to the World at neighbors' doors. The stars shone bright above us, the snow crunched beneath our feet, and our voices blended in harmonies that seemed to echo the deeper harmony we had found in our unconventional family story. As we returned to Robert and Catherine's house, rosy-cheeked and laughing, I felt a sudden wave of emotion. Looking at these beloved faces, my son, his wife, my grandchildren, and their friends, I was struck by the extraordinary journey that had brought us to this moment. From the devastating separation 50 years ago to the heart attack that had nearly taken my life, but instead restored its missing piece, every step had led here to this perfect Christmas Eve surrounded by love. Back inside, as hot chocolate was distributed and the fire was stoked, I found a quiet moment with Robert in the kitchen. "Thank you," I said simply. "For what?" he asked. "For saving my life in every possible way, for restarting my heart when it stopped beating, for welcoming me into your family when you had every reason to keep your distance, for giving me this second chance I never thought I'd have." He took my hands in his expression serious.
"You gave me life twice," he said. "Once when you gave birth to me, making the hardest choice any mother could face, and again when you trusted me to restart your heart. If anyone should be thanking anyone, it's me thanking you." "Let's call it even," I suggested with a smile. "Deal," he agreed, pulling me into a gentle hug. As midnight struck, marking the arrival of Christmas Day, I looked around at the scene before me, Emma and her boyfriend sharing a couch and comparing notes on a medical text, Jack teaching his friend how to play a card game, Catherine arranging cookies on a plate, Robert stacking wood by the fireplace, and I felt a profound sense of belonging, of rightness. This was what I had missed for 50 years, not just my son, but the family that might have grown around him, the connections that extended in all directions, the sense of continuity and belonging. And while I couldn't reclaim those lost decades, I could embrace this unexpected gift of additional time, this chance to be part of their lives, even if only for a few precious years. The locket rested against my heart, a constant reminder of the journey we had taken, from the heartbroken teenager giving away her baby to the elderly woman finding that same child, now a man who had literally held her heart in his hands and brought it back to life. A medical miracle that became a personal one. A heart stopped and restarted, a connection severed and restored. Some might call it chance, but I call it love. Persistent, patient, powerful enough to span 50 years and find its way home at last.